Hear the stories of men and women switching hustles and escaping the odds through entrepreneurship after prison. Not only will these stories inspire you, but also unlock business tips for financial freedom. Let's get it. Thank you all for tuning in to another dope episode of Escaping the Odds podcast. We're doing some things differently this time. I'm your host, Aaron Smith. Normally, we speak with the formerly incarcerated who are now successful entrepreneurs. This is Second Chance Month, so I wanted to reach out to a gentleman who's planting his foot within the criminal justice reform arena as it relates to second chance hiring. Author Jeffrey Korzenik. He has a book out called Untapped Talent, where he's going to discuss his reasoning why second chance hiring should be at the top of the list of all employers throughout society. Jeffrey, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Had a chance to review the book and audio version of it, but nevertheless, really great points that you were making. You're also a chief investment strategist for a big bank.
I am.
A national bank here. First off, how did you get into this whole arena, right? How do you go from chief investment strategist to author, proponent of second chance hiring?
I think there are really two answers. And the first answer is it came about as part of my job. I oversee investments for a major bank. To understand the investment market, you have to understand the economy, and to understand the economy, you have to understand the labor markets. And I saw, as many people did back 10 years ago, that there were too many people missing from the labor market, and we need those people to grow. And I started to understand why they weren't working, and came to the conclusion, which at the time was kind of radical, that social ills, chief among them being justice impactors, were keeping people out of the labor market. And so there was a business issue here. It was such a big problem that it was also such a big opportunity if we could get people in. And I fortunately started meeting employers who had done this and had done this successfully, and started talking about that and wrote the book of their lessons. The second answer, if I could, is my dad was the one who did the heavy lifting in our family. He died in 2003, but born into pretty deep poverty, not great home life. It's a familiar story, but he went to college and made it, but he never forgot his roots. And he would go, when I was a kid, he would go back, and he said, he called it, I've got errands to do on weekend. He's really just visiting the old neighborhood.
Okay.
And I went with him once. He introduced me to a friend of his. He'd visit different store owners, things like that he knew. And as we walked away, he said, my friend was in prison.
Wow.
And I said, for what? And he said, for murder, a crime of passion. But then my dad said to me, a lesson that's always stuck. He said, he's done his time. And so I believe people who've made mistakes, once they've done their time, and deserve the opportunity to earn their way back in and build up their life again.
Yeah, so as you approach a lot of these employers, like, what was the biggest hurdle and block or challenge with them accepting the second chance hiring philosophy?
Up until recently, they never even had to worry about it. It was just easier not to go down that road. Because we had an abundance of labor, but we stopped having enough babies 20 and 30 years ago. We have this labor shortage now, and it's not going away. So now when I'm talking to people, they're at least interested, but they are worried about something going wrong. Their danger or legal liability associated with something going wrong. They're worried about the quality of the job, that someone coming home, if they can do a good job, and then they worry about reputation risk. And there are answers to all of those and ways to respond, but they have to think through it, and it's kind of a radically new way of thinking for them.
What are some of the skill sets that you are seeing that employers are saying, wow, they're admiring?
Right.
Now, once they get someone such as myself in the doors working for them, what are they happy about or surprised about?
So all of the employers have learned to do it right, and there is a specific way to do it right. But if they do it right, they all use the same word to describe their these employees. They say they have grit, which means they can handle things going wrong. They stick to it, and they make things happen. So when you source people correctly from this population and you support them appropriately, you don't get just another employee. You get an exceptionally good employee because they're the people who care about their work, care about doing a good job. And as one judge here in Chicago told me, they'll walk through walls to help their employer.
Absolutely.
And so that's a really admirable trait for an employee.
Yeah. You said source and support. What does that support look like for a second chance employer bringing on someone with a background to be successful within their company?
You know, one of the challenges is that so many business owners, unless they've had some contact with the justice system, family member, friend, whatever, have no idea some of the burdens that are placed on people when they come home, or even if they weren't incarcerated, just have justice involvement. So one of the most basic things is being on parole or probation and having to have flex time to meet your PO. Or there could be, as we've discussed about it in some of our conversations, there can be restrictions on someone, can they go out of state or not go out of state. And so being just aware of those issues. And then a lot of the issues also come from not the fact that someone has a criminal record, but they often came from deep poverty, lack of mentorship, lack of work in the family. So, they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And so employers have to be aware of that and provide, check-ins or provide resources for their employees to get access to transportation or housing if they need those, and not just make those available, but have someone who can help the individual navigate to those resources as well.
Got you. One thing that I admired about Untapped Talent is that you took it from a theoretical standpoint to that practicality.
Yeah.
And so with that, you talked about a particular company, JBM, which was a case study within your bank, within your book. So can you kind of tap into that?
Yeah, I've met, as I mentioned, I've been very fortunate to meet employers who've really focused on this and created true talent pipelines from people with criminal records. But some of them started in different ways. Some, it was a deep religious belief of the business owner, or someone had a son or daughter who was justice involved and was very sympathetic.
Yeah.
But JBM Packaging is a company in Ohio. It's about an hour outside of Cincinnati. It's a second-generation family packaging business. They make envelopes primarily. And they came to this just because they ran out of labor. And they had tried everything else.
Yeah.
And the CEO was in church, and someone had mentioned Second Chance Employment and a company in Cincinnati that was doing it. So he started exploring it. And what happened is it was, there bumps along the road.
Yeah,
Nothing worthwhile in business is easy, but there bumps along the road. And it not only met their labor need, it's transformed the company. Because once you start thinking outside of the box and seeing how innovation can help on this employment front, suddenly innovation became every part of that company.
Yeah.
They got to the point where about 30 of their over 30 of their 150 employees are second chance. They call it fair chance.
Yeah.
Since the book was published, they opened a new facility, not in the town outside of the city where they've been, but their second facility is in inner city Cincinnati, which looks a lot like, west side, south side of Chicago, because they see that's where their talent pool is.
Yeah.
And that's a big shift. Imagine if expanding businesses looked to the south side and the west side and said, boy, this is a great place to move our business.
Yeah.
So, but they did things I think something that was amazing, it was working so well. They set up a paid training program in an Ohio prison.
Yeah.
One of their employees had made a mistake, had been sent away, and they worked with the State Department of Corrections, the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation Correction, had that employee transferred to a facility that had good HVAC connections. They donated a envelope making machine.
Wow.
They had this employee start a training program. They pay people to be in the program. They don't do prison. They don't want to do prison labor, so they've consciously they don't sell the product made there. They recycle it, and now he's got a pipeline of highly trained people who he can pay more.
Yeah.
It's just a win all around. So there's a company that had a labor shortage now has a pipeline of skilled talent.
Wow, that's amazing. And we definitely need more companies doing the same thing.
And it wasn't easy, right? Here, this guy owns the company, Marcus Shinchang, the CEO. His father founded the company. His father, by the way, from whom he bought the company, thought he was crazy going down this route. And so he had met a lot of resistance. At one point, they have a suggestion box with and someone said, we shouldn't be doing this. And he has a company meeting. He said, if you don't think we should be doing this, this is no longer the company for you.
Right.
So he had to stand up to a lot of forces. And he's got a great management team. They all got on board, but it took his focus and bringing people on board to make it happen.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, that the leadership starts at the top.
That's right.
Oftentimes it takes, at these big national companies, the CEO to say, hey, we want this.
Yeah, and part of that is, you think in, say, Illinois, which is a ban-the-box state, so people will make offers contingent on a successful background check. Background check comes back, and there's something on it.
Yeah.
It goes to either a person or a committee, typically some kind of HR function.
Yeah.
That person has very little career incentive to say yes, right? If they say yes and turns into a good employee, then it's just another good hire. That's what they're supposed to do. If they say yes and there's a problem,
that could be major.
That could be major for their career. So it really needs CEOs, company owners to say this is something we are doing, and even to do things like another company I mentioned in the book is Brown's ShopRite. It's a Brown Superstores. It's a supermarket chain in Philadelphia, and they're actually the grocer in what would otherwise be food deserts in West Philadelphia or North Philadelphia, and he's got 2,500 employees. 500 of them are justice impacted, second chance. Amazing.
Wow.
But he started out by taking his managers and saying, we're going to hire 6. So he gave them a quota. And he said, if you can't find 6 good employees in the city of Philadelphia, the problem is not this population, the problem is you as managers. Yeah. And sometimes it takes that kind of directive to make it happen.
You mentioned also in the book about bridging the box.
Yeah.
Right? Can we go into that? Like how does that differ from the ban in the box?
So that's just a term I coined to mean that you don't have to dive in right away. If you're a business owner or business decision maker, you don't have to be waiting outside the gates with employment application, right? You can explore this. And so there's a couple of things that I suggest. One is have no automatic exclusions, right? Actually consider. So if someone has, even a felony conviction 20 years old, but have been home for 10 years and have rebuilt their life, that's just another employee. What do you care? Another is to do things like go visit nonprofits. Here we are in Lawndale, North Lawndale Employment Network. Go visit them, see what they're doing to help create potential employees. Go visit employers who are doing this. If you're still not going to do it, maybe make sure you're not preventing your vendors doing it. This is very common in healthcare. That they might have a service that mows their lawn, and they prohibit people with records from being on those crews. Don't stand in the way of others. So there's a bunch of things that you can do as an employer that don't commit you, but let you get more educated. And one final one, Aaron, if I could, is educate yourself on what it means to have a criminal record, because people hear felony, they think the worst, and sometimes it is bad, right? That's the reality. But sometimes it's just
it's context.
It's context, and it's a young person being making a mistake, which we all do.
Because in some states, that felony may not even be a felony in the next state.
And we also know from practice, I have friends who pled to a felony because it probably should have been a misdemeanor, but they were unsophisticated, they were young, they didn't have parental support, and a prosecutor said, look, I'm going to call this a felony. We can put you away for X number of years, but if you plead guilty, you can come home or just have a 2-year sentence. And so a lot of times, a felony is not what people think it is.
Absolutely. You just want to kind of get the case over with.
Exactly right.
In most cases.
Exactly right. So,
Jeff, what can an employee or someone such as myself with a felony background do to make themselves more suitable for these positions and with an employer?
Very often they're already suitable. It's how do you convey that suitability to the employee? So I suggest that employers, because especially those who don't have a lot of experience in this, have to partner with nonprofits. Go work, with a nonprofit that can tell the employer who's ready.
Kind of bridge the gap for
them. Exactly right. So it's a Safer Foundation or any of the many places in Chicago or around the country that can do that. So If you have come home and you're looking for a job, consider teaming up, getting to know one of these organizations, because they can be the partner, the matchmaker.
Yeah.
The other thing is employers have taken as a signal education.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a high school degree, get a GED. If you have a GED or a high school diploma, see if you can get an associate's or get widely accepted certifications in the trades, for instance, that all show that you are more than your worst mistake. And all of those are signals. Some of them are actually, in the case of, say, trade certifications, actually do add a lot of value to the employers, but it's also equally important that it shows a signal.
No, you're absolutely right. When I was released in 2019, 2 years ago, I didn't have to go through the troubles that I hear some people may have to experience. I applied both of the jobs that I was working at a nonprofit here in Chicago. I was able to get the job with them knowing my background, and another position working in the trucking industry, as a dispatcher, which I currently employ still now. I didn't have any issues. I was upfront about it, but I think that signaling that you spoke about, they looked on my resume and they seen the education, right?
Right.
They seen some kind of a prior work experience, and then also taking ownership and accountability of your past with the situation. I think that's very critical, and I believe that's what helped me. So I didn't have some of those same issues gaining employment once I was released, and I think that's something that.
And I think you mentioned you work towards a CDL as well, and those are important. Yeah, I think it's critical that people not try to hide it, because it comes out, and how you own it is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are you saying now that most employers are a little bit more open to hiring as the years, compared to what it was 15 years ago? Are they a little bit more open?
Not much yet.
Okay.
But they are starting to ask the right questions. So I was contacted by a major company. It's a household name, but obviously you have to keep it confidential. With 40 or 50,000 employees.
Wow.
They're interested in doing this. They want to learn more. One of the problems, and I think it's really important for people, particularly in the justice reform community, to realize is a lot of employers have tried this, but if they didn't do it the right way, it left a bad taste in their mouth. So one of the things that I worry about today is, and I hear this, employers saying, I can't find employees, I guess I'll lower my standards and hire people with criminal records. It's not about that.
Right.
You got to go looking for talent. You have to say, this is a pool of people. 19 million people in the United States have felony convictions.
Yes.
That's a big pool of people, right? And you have to say, among this pool are some great employees, potential employees, but they've had a different life experience. How do I figure out who's great among them? Yeah. That's very different than saying, I guess we'll let them all in because I'm lowering my standards. Right. And so they need that process. And too many employers have that experience, or some would try to figure out who would be suitable, but then didn't understand why they kept disappearing to meet a parole officer, right? Because it wasn't part of the conversation. Or, I know I may have shared with you a terrible story of a construction firm in Indiana hired someone with a record who was a great employee, and they had a job out of state. And the employer said, hey, we need you to go out of state. And the employee didn't want to disappoint his employer. Yeah. And he was violated, right? He violated his parole, going, and was sent back. And so this employer needed to know that if you have someone with a record, they might have terms of their supervision that you need to know about, and you need to
communicate that.
You need to communicate that, and ideally, you as the employer should have a relationship with the chief probation and parole officer of the jurisdiction, and say, I'm going to provide pathways, but you have to work with me. Yeah. Let your clients, my employees, go outside the state if they need to, and that kind of thing. So if an employer hasn't known to do that, they might have had these employees just disappear, and they've never known why.
Right. In your opinion, Jeff, are there any in that 19 million base that's not employable?
I think there are. I really do. But so many are employable. I'm just kind of guessing. 600,000 plus people come out of prisons in the United States every year. I'm guessing a third are immediately employable, right? They've got stable housing, transportation, family resources, and
That's
maybe some
very
experience.
important. I'm glad you touched on those points.
Absolutely.
That's pivotal.
And then a third can be made ready, with nonprofit organizations and mentoring. And a third, for whatever reason, it's not my job to judge, what's in people's hearts, but a third, maybe they were damaged, psychologically damaged, and there's trauma, and maybe they can be helped, maybe they can't be helped, and those are the ones who are the threats to public safety, and we really have to worry about. And if we can get the people who are ready employed right away, work on the people who can be made ready, then we can focus on this smaller population that, maybe they will never be ready, but at least we will have a more manageable population to deal with.
I remember reading in a book, I believe it was the JBM company, where the CEO, someone in leadership, talked about like they had to stop leading with their heart.
Yes, yeah.
Right, and actually had to be a business sense. So this can't be a charity case situation.
That's right. And I believe deeply in the moral case for this, but that's not what I talk about. I talk to employers. You have to understand there's a business case, and if for no other reason, 19 million people, you need to scale this up.
Yeah.
And the only way we can get enough jobs is if it works for the employer to hire from this population.
Oh, wow, great, man. Well, thanks for stopping by Escaping the Odds podcast. Untapped Talent by Jeffrey Korzenik. And as you all see here, great expertise on second chance hiring. Spoke with thousands of employees throughout the country. And what's next for you? How can people reach out to you? How can they get the book?
So the book is available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold. You can also go to my website, jeffkorzenik.com. Korzenik is Korzenik. I'm the only Jeff Korzenik on the planet. So if you can get close to the spelling, you can find me.
Okay.
And you'll find podcasts, other podcasts I've been on, and articles I've written on this, as well as links to buying the book. I think the next thing I'm exploring with my I have a literary attorney here in Chicago who helped me launch the book. We're talking about a version of this book that'll be like 30 pages long and easier for people to access. So I want it to be easy for people to get to these concepts. I don't want them to feel, I got to take on a 250-page book or something like that. So
sounds good. Thank you all for tuning in to Escaping the Odds podcast. This has been a great interview with Mr. Jeffrey Korzenik. And make sure you guys tap into Untapped Talent and take care. Peace.